Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shield Therapeutics PLC Interim Results Investor Presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company review all questions submitted today and will publish those responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, we would like to submit the following poll, and I'm sure the company would be most appreciative of your participation. I'd now like to hand over to CEO Greg Madison. Good afternoon, sir.
Great, and thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today for the investor presentation to discuss our first half results for 2022. Obviously, there's a lot going on within your country over there and in England, and wishing you all the best for what is to come here regarding the Queen's health, etc. But again, we appreciate everybody dialing in and listening to the presentation today. We put out a release this morning, UK time. We're sitting here in our office in Boston, but we put out a release UK time this morning about our first half results. We'll go through those a bit in detail. And as noted here, we'll try to react to as many questions as we possibly can at the conclusion of the presentation, and look forward to the interactions here. So let's get started, if we will. So beyond the normal disclosure here, I think as we sat back and looked at the last 12 months, it's been almost 12 months since we launched Acrifer into the US. And looking at our organization, Shield Therapeutics has certainly undergone a fairly dramatic and significant transformation during these past 12 months. As we've kind of looked and put forward here, launching Acrifer into the US from a commercial standpoint. And some of the highlights listed here, along that transformation, that journey, really start to draw that point forward here. So we not only have developed, our commercial strategy and launch plan of putting Acrifer into the hands of physicians here in the US and doing that on our own. We've built a brand new leadership and commercial leadership team, both on the executive side and the commercial side here in the US. We continue to expand all of our global partnerships. We're pretty enthusiastic about what those can bring. We are driving awareness, to healthcare professionals here in the US about Acrifer, hitting over 2,300 HCPs. And last but certainly not least, we initiated our phase 3 clinical trial for pediatrics, both in the US as well as Europe, which could certainly expand our label going forward. So we are very happy and proud of what we've been able to accomplish in a relatively short period of time. And again, we've undergone a fairly dramatic and significant transformation, both in appearance, but also internally here and how we operate and what we're trying to do. Now, importantly, while Shield has undergone this dramatic transformation and adaptation, the iron deficiency market, unfortunately, has stayed very much the same. And I say unfortunately for the patient side, because what we're talking about here, the good news for us is we look at a market like this here, particularly in the US, this is a market ripe for innovative disruption. And what we mean by that is as follows. Number one, this is a very large and defined market. We've talked about this in the past, but there are 20 million patients with anemia, and they are all actively diagnosed and they're treated by physicians every single day here in the US. And that's displayed by the fact that there are 13 million prescriptions written every single year in the US for patients suffering from iron deficiency anemia. And again, primarily OTC or ferrous-based irons, kind of the same old stuff over and over again. We know exactly where these patients are going to. 80% of prescriptions are initiated by women's health physicians as well as general practitioners, right? So we know it's a large market, it's actively treated, a lot of prescriptions, we know who's prescribing them overall, yet this is an incredibly unsatisfied market. Unsatisfied and lacking in innovation, right? There really has been no innovation on the oral iron side in decades. You have minor tweaks here and there, but they're all ferrous-based compounds. It's the same old stuff overall. So what this has created is a lot of complacency in the market from a physician perspective overall, right? We'll talk about what that looks like, but in their mind, there's no innovation here. They know they want to use our oral irons. It's a very unsatisfied market. This market is sitting there. It's defined, it's big, and it's available. There is no real competition here, and Acrifer presents a chance to really disrupt and really encourage physicians that they should ask and seek more overall. So what we see over and over again is depicted here, where a patient walks into a physician's office overall, the majority of physicians are going to start with an oral iron, and they write it, they get it to the patient. It's an OTC iron or a ferrous-based iron, and it's the hope and pray strategy. They hope and pray that the product is going to work. They hope it's going to increase iron stores, and they hope and pray that the patient's not going to develop some type of GI side effects. And onto the merry-go-round we go, and the patient really runs through this cycle of switches and discontinuations. And in essence, the patient's not getting treated for iron deficiency anemia. In many ways, the results of the iron they're given are actually creating problems that are more challenging than the actual symptoms of iron deficiency anemia alone, and off and running we go. This is what's been going on here for the number of years overall, and we think we can offer more. When physicians are asked, what does good look like? What do I want to see as a practicing physician and a patient? What do I want to see in an oral iron that can help me? They want it to be well-tolerated, effective, convenient, safe, and affordable, right? Again, very clear, very straightforward. What we are very excited about is, again and again, we believe we have the product that physicians are looking for, that patients could be looking for. And again, this product could absolutely disrupt this market. And what we need to do is kind of awaken the market, right? Awaken physicians who have been so numbed by the fact that they prescribe oral iron, they hope and pray, they kind of think every iron is the same, and it's not the same. Aquifer is different. We think we've got a much better mousetrap, if you will, here, but we need to awaken the marketplace in many ways and let physicians experience and understand that they can and should expect more for their patients, right? And Aquifer certainly can do that in a way that provides not just the effectiveness overall, but also the tolerability. So that really what drives each and every one of us here, at Shield, to get this product out to as many patients as possible. The thing we need to do is make sure that physicians are aware of it, right? We've referenced that a number of times here that, they need to, we have a great product, but if physicians aren't aware of it, they don't know it exists out there, then they can't expect more. So I think all this speaks to the fact that this is a market that is ripe for disruption. If we do and execute this the right way, it can create significant value opportunities here across the board, right? So not only a significant revenue opportunity with a $2.2 billion market sitting there in front of us. Again, limited competition. We have a great product overall, but this also, if we execute right and drive the revenues we expect they can be, that creates value, across the organization for not just the company, but our respective shareholders as well. Last but not least, we built an outstanding team. So if you look across the executive team and importantly the commercial leadership team, this is a group that has profound U.S. operational experience. They have experience with over 30 different drug launches here in the U.S. They know how to launch drugs. They know how to build brands. They know how to create that type of value we just talked about as well. And you've got a team here that is highly, highly motivated because we all see the same thing. That opportunity sits right in front of us with a marketplace that is yearning for a new type of product overall, the opportunity to kind of disrupt it and create this new market here. So as we went into 2022, here's our priorities, right? We talked about this, driving brand awareness, increasing prescriptions and generating that clinical experience, and expanding patient access to Aquifer. Okay, 3 very clear, distinct priorities overall. As we put out a release this morning, and talk about how we did during the first half of 2022, here are some of the highlights, and we'll walk into a little bit more detail. So we generated over 11,000 total prescriptions written by healthcare professionals for Aquifer for patients suffering from iron deficiency anemia. We have over 1,000 brand new or first-time prescribers of Aquifer during that period of time. Net, that's a 350% increase overall in total prescriptions from the first half of 2022 as compared to the second half of 2021. And we had good, strong sequential growth quarter to quarter as well. On a payer front, we've expanded our coverage. We're up to 100 million covered lives overall, approximately 40% of all the lives that are available right now. So continue to make excellent progress there. And from a net revenue standpoint, we recorded $1.5 million in net revenues on the U.S. business during the first 6 months of the year. So we have made very, very good progress, especially as you look at the 6 months of 2022 relative to the first 6 months of launch or the back half of 21. What's really impressive here and not listed on this slide, we have done this with a very small footprint of salespeople and a very limited marketing spend overall. So we are doing more with less when you compare ourselves to what other companies are normally doing at this point during their launch cycle. Let's dive into a little bit more details here. So this depicts overall total prescriptions written by U.S. physicians. This is done now on a quarterly basis. So you can see not only we talked about the 350% growth from the first half of this year versus second half of last year, but we're also experiencing very good, strong sequential growth overall. So in the second quarter, we had an 87% increase in total prescriptions. That's following a 100% increase from Q1 to Q2. So again, very, very pleased with the progression that we're seeing there. This really showcases the fact that, we get out there, we start talking about Aquifer, there is demand out there, there is interest out there, there is a very large market out there as well, and we're starting to penetrate that nicely with our salespeople. As far as who is writing, we're getting half of our prescriptions today from women's health, and about the other half is coming from general practitioners. So very much in line with where the market opportunity is across the board, whether it be general practitioners, OBGYNs, or nurse practitioners and physician assistants that kind of support those two areas. We're seeing a very strong, consistent method there as well. From a new writer perspective, we had a very nice increase overall in the number of new writers. We had an 82% increase on the first half of 2022 versus the second half of 2021. Again, new writers are incredibly important for us, right? Or first-time prescribers is maybe the other way to kind of describe this, if you will. And that's a clear indicator that as they become aware of the product, the interest in the product, they got to write that first prescription, and that's going to be a critical part of our success. We refer to it sometimes as breadth of prescribing, but getting more new writers is critically important for us, and we're making excellent progress in that regard. The other nice thing that we continue to hear is the clinical feedback from the product, right? Whether it be from physicians or anecdotally from patients. That checkbox that I listed before of what do people want in an oral iron to treat their iron deficiency anemia, we are virtually checking all of those boxes currently. What's also nice here, I wanted to provide a little bit more detail, is when we looked at our overall prescribers and looked at those physicians that actually wrote a prescription during the first quarter of 2022, 85% of them also wrote another prescription during the second quarter of 2022, right? So getting them into this repeat prescriber mode is also an indicator that they wrote the product, they put a patient on it, the feedback was positive, it checked all the boxes, and they want to write again, and they are writing again. So that's the depth component that we need to drive here, that not only when we introduce somebody to Aquifer to get them that clinical experience, but we want to move them along the adoption scale so that they actually tend to write and look to Aquifer to be their oral iron of choice. So very good indicator for us there as well. And on the payer side, again, continue to make progress across the commercial plans, the Medicaid plans. We continue up to 100 million lives, or about 40% overall coverage here. I think you noted in the press release as well, we had a nice increase in our overall net selling price, which is also indicative of the coverage starting to take place. We signed these contracts at the end of 2021, and the coverage started to kick in 2022. So not only are patients now starting to come online here, and we have prescriptions written here, but it's also influencing our net selling price and our overall revenues as well. So shifting off the US, onto Europe and our partnerships here as well. So from a Norgine perspective, you see depicted below the graphic that indicates the number of packs that are sold in Europe. Obviously, we're prohibited from telling what the numbers are, but you can see what the incremental growth looks like there. And I would say right now, from a Norgine perspective, they're on a fairly steady growth period. What's really important to note here, however, is this is all driven off the GI call point, right? So Norgine has been very, very focused on GI as their kind of primary call point overall. They've generated, some, I think, decent growth overall, but certainly not nearly the level of what I think we would expect or that the market can expect here as well. What's really encouraging is that Norgine's undergone, quite a bit of change. As the Shield, we've transformed ourselves quite a bit in the last 12 months. Norgine's actually undergone a fairly significant change as well. And you've got some new, fresh thinking in there, particularly on the commercial side, which is very encouraging for us. What's really nice, I had a conversation back, probably about 6-7 weeks ago with the woman that's running their commercial overall. And she looked at the US marketplace and understanding that most of our business and the opportunity resides in women's health and general practitioners. She's very keen to kind of look at adapting, what they're doing right now, because they really want Ferrocru and both Germany, UK, and others to really develop and grow. So they are very, very interested in looking at what we are doing in the US and they're actively analyzing that opportunity with making plans in 2023 to potentially shift their allocation of resources towards those big call points. And really, the markets aren't that different from the side I look at it. Both in Germany and the UK, a lot of the oral iron business gets generated by those two particular specialties. Again, if we stay in the GI space from a Norgine perspective, I think we'll expect to see incremental growth as depicted here. But if we want to really kick that up and take advantage of the opportunity, I think they need to think about shifting their strategy. And the good news is we're finally having some more engaging discussions around that side. So more to come on the Norgine side. Additionally, from a global perspective, all of our partnerships continue to progress along very, very nicely. In China, we continue to enroll the phase 3 study. We put out a press release around Kai Pharmaceuticals earlier this year that they've submitted their regulatory package to the agency. We expect that approval timeline could be the middle part of 2023. And then Korea Pharma definitely is continuing to engage with the regulatory authorities. We expect to get an update from that soon on what that pathway looks like towards getting approval. And each of these come with a variety of different sales milestones, approval milestones, and royalties on the back end as well. So it's continued to progress very nicely for us. From the financial perspective, let me pause. I'll turn it over to Hans-Peter Rudolph, if you wouldn't mind running through some of the financials.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. From a financial point of view, I'd like to focus on 3 areas that were included in the release this morning. First of all, revenues. We have reported £2 million of revenues for the first half of 2022. Of that amount, roughly 60% or £1.2 million were generated from US net product sales, £0.7 million from royalties from our European partner Norgine, and the balance of £0.1 million from an upfront payment from our new partner Kai Pharma in Canada. In the comparative period in the first half of last year, Shield reported £0.5 million, all of which were generated from royalties by Norgine. Obviously, we had not yet launched our product in the US at that point. 2, in terms of bottom line results, the first half of 2022 yielded a net loss of £11.8 million compared to a loss of £7.3 million for the first half of 2021. The increase in the loss can be directly attributed to the increased operating costs, particularly selling costs, which make up £7.7 million or 65% of the operating costs of £11.9 million. In comparison, last year, the first half of 2021, prior to the launch of Accrufer in the US, selling costs were merely £2.2 million or 36% of the total operating costs of £6.1 million. And then number 3, the company had a net cash balance of £2.4 million at 30 June 2022, which is down from £12.1 million at the prior year end, 31 December 2021. This results in a monthly average net cash burn during the first half of 2022 of £1.6 million. I also like to point out, as separately reported a few weeks ago, Shield had finalized a convertible loan agreement with an existing shareholder for $10 million effective August 1st, 2022. This shareholder loan led to a net cash balance of £8.2 million at the end of August 2022, and it is expected to extend the company's cash runway through the end of the current year. Back to you, Greg.
Very good. Thank you, Hans-Peter. So all in all, as we kind of reflect on where we came from back 12 months ago, but particularly focus on the first half of 2022, which we announced this morning, we have built a very strong and solid foundation here at Shield and with our business of Accrufer in the US. We are seeing increasing prescriptions, an increase in first-time prescribers, an increase in repeat prescribers, awareness and growth are expanding, payer coverage is growing, and we have a positive clinical experience generated right now. So if there's a proverbial scorecard, we're very, very pleased with a lot of these, what I call leading indicators, right? As you're running the business and you're launching a drug where you have limited spend, small team, no awareness going into it, every single indicator that I want to see is being generated and moving in the right direction here. And again, it's an important point to note that this small team of 30 people We've listed here a modest marketing spend. I would say it's a low marketing spend relative to what others do during their launch, and limited KOL engagement. We're very pleased with where we progressed to. However, there is so much more that we can do. We go back to that first slide and think about the market disruption, the way to go after this market. It is literally sitting right in front of us. And we're happy with the progress we've made, but there is a lot more that we can and will and intend to do. The drivers to be able to accomplish that, right? So this is important here. It's like we think about how do we accelerate growth? How do we turn this brand into the hundreds of millions of dollar brand that we expect it can be and really reach our full ambition? There are three primary ways we need to do this. Number one, we need to expand our field force. Number two, we need to really step up and amplify our digital strategy and marketing initiatives. And number three, we need to increase our KOL engagement and support our data generation across the board here. So we've got a small team, limited resources, and however, we've created a very strong proof of concept here that there's a market, there is interest, there are prescriptions being done, we're getting payer coverage, so we need to scale this business overall, right? If we're kind of operating on a small scale right now, the goal is we have to scale this business and do it in a most efficient and economical way that can really recognize and drive the value we expect overall. So that really leads to the question of so how do we maximize the opportunity here overall, right? And clearly, in order to do this, we need to kind of finance the company and get onto our front foot here and really start to drive a lot of these initiatives that we talk about here as well. As we sit here today, we are very, very reliant on our 30 salespeople. There's really not a lot that's going on around them, unfortunately, at this point in time, and we can do a lot more. And the importance of that is, look, you've got a salesperson that goes into an office. When they can get in front of the doctor, they engage, they can create that interest overall. When that salesperson leaves the office and it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks before they get back in, or sometimes it might be months before they get back in between that, you have to have other ways that physicians are hearing about Accrufer. It could be Congress presence, it could be digital online, opportunities. There's a number of different ways that physicians, you want to keep Accrufer front of mind, keep that in front of them overall. And that's really the way that the pharma business is driven right now. And that's how you drive success. We are overly reliant on the ability of our reps to get in front of a doctor and really drive that awareness overall. So first and foremost, we need to finance the company as a growing organization with revenue starting to increase, our prescriptions increasing as well. We feel like this is a very, very investable business to be able to scale that up overall. And we are pursuing a number of different opportunities in that regard. The other things we're looking at is more on the business development side, kind of strategic partnership side, that alongside as we're pursuing the different financial opportunities, is there another way we can scale this business, right? Is there another way that we can look at it creatively to think about, all right, what can Shield do? Or is there another organization that can work alongside us or with us, or whatever it may be, to help scale this business? But bottom line, we have to be able to scale this business in order to really capture the full value that Accrufer can bring, the full value that can be then translated to Shield, and the full value that can get translated over to our shareholders. And rest assured, we're pursuing that in a number of different ways. And bottom line is we're performing well, but we want to do so much more. And the team here is motivated to do so much more. So really, it's all about taking advantage of this Accrufer opportunity. If we execute this well, there's tremendous revenue potential. There's tremendous value creation potential overall. And we mentioned before, this market is just ripe for disruption. Large market, but very unsatisfied. We've got a best-in-class product. There's limited competition. We have a long IP runway. And you've got a team in place that knows how to do this and knows how to build brands and be successful in launches. So with that, that'll end the prepared parts of the presentation. So we'll now open it up to Q&A. Just give me 1 second here so I can scan through the list of questions and make sure that we've got a couple of those to go.
That's great, Greg. Let me just jump in and give you a few moments anyway. So thank you once again for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab just on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Greg and the team take a few moments to review your questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we'll notify you when that's ready for your review. Greg, I know I haven't given you any time at all, perhaps, but if I may just hand back to you, if I could ask you to read out any of the questions and give a response where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm going to join. I've got Hans Peter and Jose here as well, so I'll kind of quarterback this, if you will, and field some questions, and give the questions off to some of them as well. So, Hans Peter, there's a question here listed on in the press release. Excuse me. There was a note on the net selling price, how that's increased, from first half of 22 versus last half of 21. Would you mind just commenting on that and how that affects, ties into the payer coverage side?
Sure. Yes, specifically what we disclosed in the release was that in the second half of 2021, so the first half after the launch, our net selling price for the product was around $35 in the US, and that increased in the first half of 2022 to $154. Obviously a very substantial increase, but I think we need to really take a little bit of a step back. It's certainly very good news, and we're at the moment very pleased with the net selling price, average net selling price of over $150. But the way it works really, the net selling price is a formula of both distribution costs and the rebates, discounts that you grant to various payers. And obviously a mix too of how many of your products that you sell are effectively covered through covered lives by payers versus others that you have to subsidize yourself by patients who are not insured at this point in time. So what you see obviously is a significant increase. And when you put that in perspective, last year in 2021, most of the payer contracts that we were able to negotiate only came into effective December. So at the very, very end of that half year, which means a majority, or at least 5 months worth of sales, were effectively subsidized by the company. It was important to sell these products and create awareness about the product, make writers and patients used about the opportunity of Acrofer, but we obviously did not earn a lot of money on it as a result of the fact that little payer coverage was available. That changed rapidly, obviously, and for most of the payer contracts that we did sign, those were in fact toward the end of 2021, and thus the increased net sales price for 2022. Going forward, we hope to further increase that net selling price, and ultimately, we hope to get somewhere in the range of $200 to $250. Certainly $250 is what we believe could be a reasonable target. How quickly that will be achieved is very difficult to say, because negotiations with new payers and existing payers continues on. Sometimes you can improve on existing contracts, and obviously if we wanted to, we could get a lot more payers on board today. The problem is, what price can you achieve for that, and how much potential upside on product revenue do you want to sacrifice in order to get deeper payer coverage? So in other words, we need to make sure until payers are actually willing to agree on a reasonable rebate with us, and at that point in time, we can sign up additional payers as well, and hopefully then thus improve the net sales price going forward.
Very good. Yeah, you hit one question that was on here too around expanding payer coverage. I think you just alluded to that. Like, we're very keen to continue to expand our payer coverage. We're very pleased with contracts we have right now. The goal right now is to drive demand, right? We need to be able to drive demand. And as Hans Peter alluded to, there are payers out there that we'd like to get. However, you need to have a reasonable discussion to make sure that it works for both sides, right? And not have a one-sided arrangement. It doesn't do us any good to kind of just work on focusing and increasing payer coverage. If it's going to cost the business significantly, we're not going to do that, right? We're going to run this business the way that we expect we should. And that's how we're going to proceed forward here as well. So excellent question. There's a question here, I'll field it as well, that we're seeing, I think it's early September, where we're sitting right now, is a question of like, hey, can you give us an update of July and August? The short answer is no. We're going to do this on a quarterly basis. We're not going to get into a month-to-month discussion of how things are progressing here as well. The other reason, just to give a little insight, is we don't have the final data for August yet, for example, right? So, we don't get prescriptions. So prescription data, you're here in the US, so all the data reports are lagged significantly. So they're up to a month later is when we actually get the final data. So what we certainly do not want to do is put half-baked data out there into the marketplace, nor do we want to do this on a monthly basis. So just some color and context that, again, we're going to continue to monitor things. We'll report on quarterly or half-year basis as we've been doing right now. But part of the reason is we just simply can't provide real-time updates for even a month. Even though we're 8 days into September, we don't have August closed just yet. Okay. Hans Peter, there's a number of questions around financing as expected, right? That's obviously a critically important point for us. We have great aspirations. We believe this is an investable business. but questions on just financing in terms of how or what options were available to us, and perhaps you can expand on that a little bit.
Sure, happy to do so. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that management continues to consider various options for financing, and we obviously based on the cash runway, the need for additional financing is very evident. What form, timing, and amount that financing will take is currently still under discussion, but we certainly consider both potentially dilutive as well as non-dilutive financing options. That could be in the form of straight debt. It could be in the form of royalty financing, which is something that actually could be very interesting for the product that we have right here. There is some future cash flows that we can predict here with, more or less certainty, but the initial foundation that has been set in the first 12 months since the launch is certainly promising that revenues would further ramp up and eventually lead to positive cash flows, and that could be attractive to potential royalty lender. So we believe that's a very, very viable option for us to pursue going forward. In addition to that, we also don't rule out dilutive financing, potentially looking into an equity raise, which we obviously attempted a few months back already, but unfortunately due to the adverse market conditions was not successful ultimately. But we haven't given up that thought. And if we pursue that route, we'll certainly make that public to everyone, to existing shareholders as well as to prospective new shareholders. We feel if there is an equity raise, it would only make sense for us to consider potentially make this available to a wider audience as well.
Good. Just scanning the questions here. Look, I think from a financing perspective, what's critical for us is that we continue to expand and grow our business. As I mentioned before, we are we're operating at I'd say, relatively small scale at this point. If you go back, and folks on the phone may not be sure of this, but you look at U.S. launches into the U.S., even from a small company perspective overall, our level of SG&A spend that we do really is dramatically lower than even the low end of companies that launch out there in the U.S. So we are definitely doing more with less, but that's not going to get us to where we need to get to overall, right? So as I look at our business, the questions commonly asked or should be asked is there a market? Yes. Is there an opportunity? Yes. Are there competitors in the market or coming down the road? No, we don't foresee any real, strong competition in this market right now. Do we need to invest additional resources in this market? Of course we do, right? But I'd like to just get to the low end of average, versus what we're operating on now. Our SG&A spend has been $5.5 million the last 2 quarters consecutively. And you look at other companies, it's dramatically higher than that, right? So we're going to continue to manage our resources very efficiently as we've done and very effectively. We've got a team that knows how to do that as well. But certainly that scaling of the business is critical. And I think we feel confident that there's an ability to get this business invested in, particularly with the trends that we see right now, the options that are sitting there in front of us, as Hans-Peter alluded to. We've got dilutive options, non-dilutive options. We're going to manage this thing very, very carefully to ensure that we do what we need to do to run the business, but also keep an eye on what's important and valuable for all of us as shareholders in this business as well. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there for us going forward. Jose, I'm going to toss one over to you. There was a question around awareness building and some of the exposure that physicians have had. Just from a clinical feedback perspective, what are you hearing and seeing out there? Any changes that you've noted?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Certainly from the awareness perspective of the physicians and providers there, we've been working to really, accelerate and expand that as you presented earlier. The feedback that we're getting from patients and also physicians is very positive in terms of the clinical experience. I mean, the clinical experience that we're seeing in the field is kind of translated very similar to the clinical experience that we saw in the clinical trials. So anecdotally at this point, certainly very positive. As we continue to move forward, and as you mentioned as well, one of the areas that we need to expand is continue to generate more data, to continue to basically inform the providers and the patients on the efficacy and the safety of the product, and doing that through real world evidence. And we're looking at many different options in the future to execute on that. But in general, the clinical experience and the attitude related to the product has been very positive.
Good. Excellent. All right. Give me a minute here to look. There's a question on if we are pursuing deals outside in other countries such as Japan. So yeah, I think on a business development side, if we look at global partnerships, again, we've made really nice progress over the last 12 months here in certain other areas. We're going to continue to look for opportunities, right? So Japan's an opportunity. There's a market there, much as we see here in the US, then absolutely we'll pursue that and look to find some partnerships here wherever we feel like there's an opportunity to get Aquifer in the hands of patients that are in need of it, but also do it in a smart way from a business perspective. We'll definitely continue to keep an eye out for those opportunities.
Yeah, I've noticed a couple questions too that point toward the question about the direction when we expect to reach cash flow break even or profitability. And I think those are obviously important metrics and important targets that the management team is aware of, but it might not be the only metric that we need to keep in mind. And it's very typical for small pharmaceutical companies to really measure the potential of a drug by how quickly you can ramp up your revenues, your sales, and effectively show that the peak sales that you forecast for a particular medicine is actually achievable in the time that you have until the end of patent protection. So there is a very fine balance between trying to move toward break-even point for cash and profitability and trying to reinvest some of the funds into further building out your commercial activities and thus increase your gross in net sales. And we're trying to walk this line. So the question that has been asked here is very difficult to answer, and only time will tell. For us, it is important that we could show continued growth in the sales activities. And as such, we need to have that balance and also invest in the commercial activities with some of the cash flow that we could generate going forward.
Yeah, I think that's critical. Right now, revenue, increasing prescription revenue generation is primary job one, period. And that's what's going to really create the market, as far as, at some point harvesting those sales and, for turning more towards profitability and figure out how to efficiently do that. That's not a near-term goal for us. Our goal right now is going after those 13 million prescriptions written every single year. And we are virtually just scratching the surface of what we can and want to do. If there's any frustration that we experience is we see the market, we see the potential, we've seen the feedback, but we're doing this in a way that, in some ways we got both hands tied behind our back because we're doing it with a small, dedicated, motivated team here with limited resources, and we see the opportunity. And this isn't, again, somebody that's sitting there saying, hey, give me more money and we'll do a better job. We're doing a great job with what we have, but there's so much more we can do. If we want to turn this into the business we expect it to be, man, there is so much potential here, and we do not want to see that wasted. That's really what we want to do. We do firmly believe that dollars invested in this business will pay off significantly, and that's our goal right now in the short term. So we're happy with the progress we made. We got to get the company financed. I do believe we can get the company financed with the opportunity we see in front of us, and then we're ready to roll on our side. So I think, let me see if there's any other popped up questions that are worth hitting here. Let's see, you mentioned the question here, 87% of prescribers are writing second prescriptions. Any insight to those that are not? Any common themes on negative feedback from prescribers? Yeah, leave it to figure out like the 13% that aren't writing versus focusing on the 87% that are writing. That's a really, really good score, right? So I'm not going to comment on why somebody may have not written. Maybe they didn't see a patient during that period of time. I'm not sure, but to have 87% of physicians who wrote a product in Q1 do that again in Q2, that is phenomenal, right? And that's our focus. So we should be really, really happy with that. We really haven't heard any negative clinical feedback on the drug, right? So we finally get the chance, if one of our reps can get in front of a physician and actually talk to them about the drug, rarely do we hear, no, not buying it, don't like it, clinically doesn't make sense to me. It's the opposite. It's like, great, everything looks good. If there's a question or comment, it usually is a, hey, how do I get it? And how much is it going to cost my patient? That's really the main drivers here. So there are patients out there that either you're uninsured or don't have insurance. So if there's a reason somebody may not write it or a particular patient may not get it, it usually is going to do with more of a cost to the patient overall. We've got a lot of different protections around that can be, but it's not 100%. So I think clinically, we feel really good about the feedback we've heard, and we're going to continue to work on that. And again, it's all about how we continue to drive more physicians to become aware of Aquifer, how to drive more prescriptions in the funnel, and the opportunity is sitting there right in front of us.
I think you need to combine that, Greg, with the 5-fold increase of new writers from Q1 to Q2. I think that as we continue to create awareness, as people continue to learn about Aquifer, as people start to really kind of prescribe it for the first time, certainly they want to see the experience of the patient to write it again. And I think that it takes time. We have a 5-fold increase of new writers in Q1 to Q2. We had a lot of repeat, writers that we saw 87% in Q2. I think that's great. But certainly, those patients have to come back. Those patients have to provide their experience to the patient, to the physician. The physician has to see the effect of the product. And as you mentioned before, once the physician knows about the product, once the physician, is introduced to the product, and they prescribe it. And then once the patient starts on the product, they continue the product that we have seen. So I think it's a combination of both factors that will come into effect moving forward.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. Yes, for us, it's twofold. One, happy with what we have. Number two, we got to scale the business, right? And that's really the goal there. It ties directly into the financing side. So is this an investable business? We believe it absolutely is. If we can secure the financing, or shall I say, when we secure the financing overall, we believe that there's a dramatic opportunity here, and that's our really focus and goal. And also bear in mind, we're actively pursuing not just financing opportunities, but other strategic opportunities as well, right? So there's different ways you can scale your business and get it to the level that you really want it to be at overall. You can do that in, kind of sections or transitions over time. There may be opportunities with business partners that can help us get there faster. So all those things are being actively pursued as we speak right now. And again, the nice thing is we believe we've established a very, very solid and strong foundation from which we can believe at. And that provides a lot of attractiveness because, again, this is no longer a proof of concept type of approach, if you will. We've established as a market, there's a need, there's coverage, and we can execute on that side as well. Now, again, we just need to scale that business. So that's what the team here is hard at work at. So I think, Mark, that's it that I see from questions here. I think we can kind of wrap it up if you want.
No, that's no problem, Greg, at all. And of course, any further questions that come in, we'll make those available to you post the meeting anyway. I think you've very nicely summarized the position of the company. And maybe, Greg, if there are any further comments, please feel free to share them. If not, I'll redirect investors to give feedback, which I know is particularly important to you and the rest of the board.
No, again, thank you guys and gals for your interest and the time on the call today. We'll look forward to keeping you updated on our progress. And as soon as we have additional news, you'll be the first to hear about it.
That's great. Greg, Hans-Peter, Jose, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon and for updating investors. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Shield Therapeutics, thank you very much indeed for attending today's presentation. Good afternoon to you all.